Going to look a bit chaotic, but we have finished the cold grey coat. Now this is still a bit too bright for me. I am trying to keep this paint job a little bit simple. So the style that I've gone, so this one in the background is not done by any means. It is done with the shading though. And you can see I've gone for a much darker look. But we'll hopefully get something similar to that, and I'll darken this in the next stages here. As you can see with these miniatures in the background, my Halo ground command, I've got my copy, or some of my copies. But I am still going to work on this video for you first, Huey 1, because I said I'd do that first and it's inappropriate to just jump onto the next one. So I hope you appreciate this, because I'm going to work off my little butt and try and do it today. So we'll see how this goes. So our next step is going to be mixing our cold grey, because again we did think this was a bit too bright. Putting some of that down there. And I'll be using Vallejo black green. But this is the air range, so you could use any color for this, like just a plain black if you wanted. I prefer to have a bit of green to it because I think it adds to that UNSC vibe. Like, they really do have that. Now this won't look exactly the same as the other ships that I've done, because this is all by hand and we're not using the same colors. I'm trying to stick to a really simple technique because a lot of people just don't have as much experience painting, you know, because Halo's a very iconic thing. Alright, mix that. Maybe a bit of a black, so I'll just add a bit of black. Again, I'm using the air line, but that's just because that's what's next to me. And apparently today I'm adverse to standing up. So that's just Vallejo black. And the black-green was this one. I love this color. I really, really do love this color. If I had to marry a color, it would probably be black-green. It's just so versatile and pretty good straight out the pot. Okay. Now mixing that up, that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy. It's a nice dark color, really dark compared to this. So we're actually going to see some pretty extreme contrast here because I am just a little unhappy with how bright this is. So mixing that through, let's do that there. Sort of like another coat. Now you'll notice I haven't watered that down. Now if you were listening to everything else I've said, you'd be like, what you doing, Oni? What you doing? This is terrible. And the simple reason is because this is the air line. So Vallejo air is already very, very watered down and thin in comparison. So you don't want to overdo it. I'm mixing in a bit of water now, just to see, because I wanted to just test and see how far this is going. And because this is the air line, it is going to run into the crevices a lot more, because it's just a much finer pigment. It's already watery, like I said. And so we're going to coat that there. This is essentially just redoing the previous step that I just did. And the reason behind that is, again, because I was just not happy with how the color turned out per se. Just mixing up some more of that. You might actually also notice that the base looks like it's got a bit of dust. That's not dust, that's just paint that's flecked. I've got about 1 million of these bases, so it doesn't really worry me. Now here you can see that the greens are a bit off. So the green here, focus, there we go, it's slightly too green compared to this blacky grey here. So this one's a bit tinged, so I'll add a smidge more black. You really do have to be careful with how much black you add. And put that, and there we are, we're back to a good colour. And remembering this has still got the water from before in it. And I am just going to very quickly go over and just recoat this, just so I've got this nicer colour here. Well, in my opinion, nicer colour. Mix that through there. Put it in. And it's also a lot easier to see where it has and has not been done, because comparing this to the primer is a lot easier than comparing the cold grey. Now I know you're probably a bit frustrated that I'm doing a mixture based off this, but the principles here are the same no matter what. So some people might not necessarily like that I'm doing this model with mixtures, because that is more of an advanced thing, because you do have to sort of get the same thing. Like, obviously that green that I just had there was greener than this grey here, and that can be very difficult when you're trying to paint and you're getting a bit frustrated because you're not getting the same result every time. And so I would recommend doing this with something like a cold grey, but my hope is that I can actually slot this into one of my pre-existing fleets without it being too obviously a different one. At this early stage, the paint job doesn't matter so much. Like the coverage, just like the last one when I was doing the cold grey, because this really is the same roll, it doesn't matter so much. So blah blah blah. Doesn't matter if it's not perfectly even because I'm going to touch this up with a second coat. I'll do this whole thing here and then I'll show it to you when it's done. There we have it. Now this is a first pass base coat, so it is sloppy, it is ugly, it is messy, but it is a start. The important thing here is that it's thin. So if I put on another coat over this, or another, 4, 5, 6, as long as they're all sufficiently thin, I'm not going to lose the quality. Like, we've got really thin panels on this figure, and I don't want to lose them. So I've opted to go for multiple small coats. That first one is on, that's just a mixture of a dark green, a black, and a grey. And I will be coming over this with another pass. Like you can see, there's parts that I've missed, like just in crevices in here. We've got just panels that are not evenly coated. Like some of these panels up here look quite light grey because it's just run into the crevices. And then other parts like back here where it's quite thick. These panels at the back are definitely not even. So what we're going to do is just very carefully leave this for about 10 minutes. Just make sure that all dries. If I try and put it on too soon, I'll end up with just streaks and I'll make the whole problem worse. So it's definitely best to an easy way to see is just how glossy it is. So you can see that tail here, which is the part I've done most recently, is still quite glossy. Whereas this part's quite matte, so it's pretty much a given that this part's relatively dry. This is relatively wet. The other side, which is where I've did, because this is the one that I didn't show you at the start, is still drying. So we're going to leave that. This first pass, you're not going to win any painting awards off it, but the idea behind this is a base coat. It is a coat of paint where you're not going to be unhappy if this color shows through. So it's a dark grey, because if that's showing through in some of these deeper parts back here and things like that, you're not going to be unhappy if that shows through. If you have a white undercoat for a model, and then you put a base coat of a dark brown or something like that on it, but you don't get it all over it, you'll have bits and splotches of white, which is why most people prefer to start with a dark one. Like you can see in here, I have not done anything on the top of this part there, so it's a bit hard to tell with the light, but I've completely missed that section, so we're just going to go through in a little bit and do that then. Film it, because apparently watching second paint coats being applied is about as fun as watching second coats of paint dry. But I've gone around, done the figure as best I can, just doing that. No real major dramas, like, because the places that I have missed, such as deep inside there, should be gotten later when we do a wash, and if there's anything that remains by the time we do all the grey, it should be pretty hard to see, and you definitely won't catch it at a glance from a table. So that is a dark base coat that we've done here. So it's almost so dark that we could call that an undercoat, which is basically just something so that we're not going to see any splotches of that white primer, or because it was a bright grey, which will, in comparison to how dark we're going to be doing this ship, shine through quite a fair bit. Make sure that we got everywhere there. And as you can see, the coat's a lot nicer now. It's by no means perfect, but it is a lot nicer. And when we start doing the paints on top of that, it's going to be much better. So what we'll be doing now is basically the same colour, but this time with more grey added, because this time we're going for a brighter version. Now we don't want the contrast to be too ridiculous, so we'll try this out and see, because this colour does actually come out much brighter than it dries. So we'll try it out just in little places. Yeah, it's not so bad, but it is a bit watery, so we might have to basically scratch this line of it, because that's the problem with using Vallejo Air when you're not supposed to, because it's not actually an airbrush. Believe it or not, this paintbrush is not an airbrush. We just need to be careful that it doesn't run too much. Start putting that on. And what we're going to try and do is just target certain areas that are more likely to be receiving higher amounts of light. It does not matter if you're not too specific at this stage. It does not matter that the paint's not fully dried at this stage. We could do each individual panel and try and make it so that there's a reflective coat, but that's very, very time consuming. And at an introductory level, we're not really wanting that kind of paint job. So what we'll do here instead is try and make it look like the panels all over the ship are actually doing something. So places that you'd expect there to be a bit more brightness. So for instance, these panels here, I would expect to be brighter. Now we're going to leave a bit of a black slash down there, because that's somewhere that would be shaded. I'll take this back, start drawing the paint job back further and further and further. like that. So again, we're leaving a bit of a black spot underneath here because that's where light would not get. And we'll sort of stop it on this last panel here, where we'll go partially onto it, but not fully, because you'd expect some of this to be sort of shaded, and it's just going to add a bit more contrast to the figure. Now down here, we'd expect these panels to be a bit brighter, and we might stop just about there. So you'll notice that I left that last little bit at the bottom its original color, and that's because we'd expect there to have less light. So here's going to get hit. Move that away so we don't have that annoying rocking sound. Here would get hit, and it does not matter because again this is quite a thin paint coat, so we can afford to be a bit rambunctious with where we're applying it. And with painting, it's sort of bringing stuff up and then taking it back down, then bringing it up, taking it back down, and it's just repeating that process again and again and again until you've got something that looks fairly natural, or as natural as you can sort of, you know, make out of something like this. So there we've got that, and there. Where you do need to be a bit careful with this paint job is places that are naturally going to be darker. So in these crevices here, like these much darker lower parts, we've sort of got to treat this like a much higher layer of highlight. So I need to be very careful with where I apply it, because in here, that's probably all we're going to do. Old dog hair again on the brush. That's probably about as high as we're going to get in that crevice. So you need to be a bit more sparing with how you apply it. Whereas here, where we're going to hit it a few times, I can be a bit more liberal with how I apply it. Put that on the top. Now we make sure we hit lots of the top spots, because this is not a highlight. This isn't really even a mid coat yet. We're still dealing with that really, really dark color. And it is so dark that we can get away with putting it pretty much everywhere, and it won't look too out of place. We're just trying to create some interesting shades and hues and things like that. We might do this like a metal color on top just to break up the monotony of the figure. We'll do the entire top in this color, brighten it back up again a bit. And in there. So this is the exact same color as the initial coat, just with a bit more grey added. And that was cold grey. Now I'd expect all of here to be pretty much higher. All of these parts. And I do feel the need to defend my paint jobs. I can do a much more refined job than this and take my time, and even by brush I could really draw this out, get a good effect. But this isn't designed for the advanced painter. This is designed for new guys who just like Halo, like their figures, but would like to paint them. And because I'm going to hit these areas at the bottom again, this is an example of paint being too watery, so it's pooling, it's not going where I want it to. It's such a low level coat that it's going to be superseded by the later coat, so I'm not too phased by what it's doing right now, but I would not be using this on anything where this was the end product. This is just way too watery, so we're not going to do that. So I'll continue to record, but maybe I might try and speed this up on the video. I've got a video editor I'm trying to learn to do, so bear with me on that. Now that part there, I'm going to call attention to, because that's far too watery even for what we're doing here. Like way too watery, like that is mistake level, because we've got at the moment a brighter color running into the ravines and the crevices, and so it's actually highlighting the opposite of where I'm supposed to be hitting. That means that the wet palette has let too much water seep through, and I've got to call this stuff dead. And there's quite a bit left, so that's dead to me now. Now how are we going to fix this? Uh-oh, I've done this. So brushes have got wicks action, so you're going to essentially draw it up. So I'm drying the brush off a little bit. I'll get that, and now with a dry brushed off paint job, I'm going to apply this brush, and it should suck up the wet paint and it's just doing that because the brush is dry and the water wants to spread out a little more. So that was a good thing that happens. It wasn't a good thing that it happened at all, but that I could show you what the method is to deal with that. So now I'm going to steal a little tiny bit of that. And so the grey paint, which is game series, I can take some of and put it away over to the side and don't have to worry about it too much. Okay, so hopefully that's better. No, still not. To try and get paint that's a little bit thicker, I have grabbed an actual black paint instead of the Air version, which is a lot chunkier, which should lend itself to being better used. So when I combine the grey and the black, and I'm still going to steal the green from the Air, so I've got the consistent, because black and greys are pretty common across the lot. We should still get that same sort of colour. And hopefully it's going to be a little bit dry, so we can test that on this table. Yeah, that's a lot better, but because we've got the water still coming through from the wet palette, I don't anticipate it's going to stay too good for too long, but that's okay, because we'll just try and move along a little more quickly. See, that's going on, and it's staying pretty much where I'm putting it. That's much nicer. And again, this is by no means our final layer, so I'm going to put this on the fast forward mode, and I'll show you this when this first coat is done. Now, I've managed to fix the wetness of the paint because it's coming out a little bit bad, so we'll try and keep going with that. So this is the next coat up. It's a bit more grey added. I've gone and removed the wet palette because my paint was just getting too watery far too fast, which meant that I was just wasting all my time because I would only get a few strokes out of each individual lot. Now here again we're applying this just again. This time I'm going to leave a little more of this. You'll notice we've got that first coat of dark, then we've got our lighter grey, and now we've got a lighter grey again that we're going to leave. And so what we're hoping to try and get is just this gradual transition. It's not ideal brushwork. I am not spending too long on this because it does not have to be perfect. A lot of this will be fixed up later on down the track. Now we just be a bit more careful how we apply this. Put that on the top there. Now we'll apply this about here because we'd expect the light to be a bit brighter there. And we're going to leave that last bit down there. Bit of a smoother transition, so there. And this will dry a bit darker again, so that it won't be quite so striking as what we've got. I've gone a bit uneven, so I'll just use my finger to sort of wipe that off, get it back a bit higher, and then I'll reapply it to about where I wanted it, which was about in line with that there. And we just keep going. This time we're just going to leave a little bit more. Just leaving a little bit more. So this time instead of covering most of it, we just cover a fair bit of it. And we'll go higher again after this. And just that gradual, progressive build-up is really instrumental in making the ships just look that little bit extra alive. If you were doing a big batch of these, and like you were just making this paint up, and you're doing all these ships as opposed to the one I'm doing now, you can get decent speeds for doing this too. It doesn't have to be quite as slow as it appears to be per ship for this, like I'm doing here. You can definitely get it a bit faster. Now, because I'm not using a wet palette, I've had to manually water this down. I'm not letting the water just happen naturally. So I've got to keep an eye on it, make sure it's not coming out too thick anywhere in particular. So definitely need to hit this panel here. So that would be hit by that. And we are going to individually shade and do these panels down the line very soon, so no real worries about getting it into the deeper parts because we're going to cover that with a much smaller brush than this one here. So I'll put that there. Pretty happy with how it's looking on this side. It's not bad for a quick brush job. So I did give myself a bit of a limit on how long I could spend on this figure because I'm naturally a very, 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 very slow painter, and you probably wouldn't want to watch me just do this umming and ahhing for hours and hours on end. I don't think that would be too useful for you as a tool. Maybe as something to put you to sleep at night, so if you want to have it as a bit of a bedtime lullaby, just only dragging on. Then I can put one of those up in future, but for now, for an actual painting instruction tutorial, this seems pretty good. Alright, I'm going to do the other side, and we'll resume then. If you were curious, that right there is about a mid-coat, what we just did. So what we're doing now, or we're about to do, is start to sort of highlight that a little bit more, and we'll start getting into the territory of higher than a mid-coat, which would be your first highlight stages. So we're still sort of not quite there. I mean, this is probably a little bit bright, but I'm going to highlight these areas anyway, so the contrast is a bit too striking at the moment, but on the final product it won't be, especially once we start to shade it back down, which is an important technique when you're doing painting like this, because bringing colours back down can sort of bring them all into line. So that right there is sort of a mid-coat. So it's not these deep parts here, because that's more of our base coat. It's more this mid-tone here, because it's halfway between our base coat where we started, which was very dark, and the final highlights where we're going to be getting. And so we do need to cover like these engines at the back a bit more, but they're going to be a bit brighter, because I think they would just be brighter. We'll do a bit of OSL, but it'll be by hand, so it's going to be fairly easy. Hitting here. Now up till now we've sort of been focusing a little bit equally between the top and the bottom, which is good because we're still working with quite a dark palette. Now that we're going to start to sort of brighten things up a little bit, we need to be hitting the top a little bit more than we're hitting the bottom, because the top obviously is going to get more light, because, well, it doesn't have to be, like, because this is in space. I mean, for crying out loud, we could be having light come from directly behind or directly in front, but the standard, archetypical, easy for an artist point of view is to make it so that the light's coming from this like above point here, and it's just coming down, hitting the figures. So we could, you know, start highlighting from the bottom up, but that's a lot more work and requires a lot of thinking. If we work this way from the top down, we're actually working with, most of the time, natural light, because guess what? Light fixtures tend to be towards the roof. So we've got that. Here we're going to start being more and more selective with where we hit. So where before we came down to about halfway, a little bit further past, maybe 2/3, with this part we're just going to get about up to here, which is pretty much just this line. With painting this, it is sort of important that you get lines. So these strokes do kind of have to be pretty nice. It's all well and good to do something like that, but if I end up with something like that there, and like there, you can see how it's going up and down. It just takes away from that realism, because we're trying to sort of emulate panels, and panels being flat. So you do want to try and work on being able to do straight lines like this. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but there. And so this time we're stopping shorter again. So where before we went all the way there, we'll stop there. And I will raise that a little bit because that's a bit too low. And again, we want to focus on this top to sort of show that the top's getting hit much more, especially towards this front part. Like that. And we'll hit this part here. And there. Tops of these would definitely be getting hit. Down here. But we'll only do this middle part. That's all we're going to do. And the top there. We're not going to go any lower anymore, because now we're trying to show that the top's actually a lot brighter. So I'll do that there. And we're really just emulating light. That's essentially what painting is. Most of the time is just emulating light. Oh dear, I've kind of lost where my paint was. Note to self, try and make it a little bit clear about which one's the current grey that you're using. So if we look at this from the top, nowhere near as pretty. There we are, focus. So we'll hit here, I think that's about right. And we'll hit here towards the front, just letting that grey do the story. Like, it's doing the talking for us. We can hit this top, because we'll highlight those and shade them down. And we'll do some line highlights. So don't have to worry too much about that. We'll make sure the tops of these are hit so the transitions end up being nice. But again, we'll hit those with other colours, so I'm not too fussed about this top part looking good or bad. Been a bit lazy on the top part, mostly because I'm focusing on the sides, but yeah, you know, do as I say, not as I do, as the old saying goes. Makes it a bit more grey. Probably a bit too much for these side panels where I'm getting back to. We'll work with that. Quick way, because I've lost track of where the grey was, and that is a bit naughty. What I'm going to do is come back here and just sort of check how it's going. So this is brighter than I had, but I'll just use it as the next highlight. Especially because I think that other one ended up drying a bit darker than even our previous coat. Okay, so there, and again, I'll just reapply it here, just so that I know that this time it's going to be a fair bit brighter. But you can see how this is one of those trickier coats because the colour dries so much darker. You have to sort of know that about your paint if you're going to get anything out of it, or otherwise you can end up with what I've done here, where when I put it on wet, to my eye it looked great, but it's come back and it's dried ridiculous. So put that on there. Sorry, bit of an awkward angle, so trying to get that through. But you can sort of see where I'm going with this, and as it dries, hopefully it becomes clearer. At this stage, we've almost done as much as we can do for the non-specific, just all over highlighting, shading, highlighting that we can do. So at the moment, we're definitely starting to get to the highlight territory. Now, some of the streaks you can definitely still see very clearly, like you can definitely see that there's lines between that, but hopefully that'll go down once we do some of the other aspects of this in a little bit. But again, this is for a tabletop quality ship. I can show you one of the other ships that I have done. Have I got it here with me? I do not. I'll go get it out of its case shortly, but this is for a tabletop ship, and it is to get it done fast and to get fleets done, although it is quite painful for me because I am a bit of a perfectionist. What we're going to do is one final coat, and this time it'll be pure cold grey, not Codex grey, and we'll put that on, and then after that we'll be doing a much smaller brush. So instead of using this Vallejo brush I've got, we'll be using a Sable Kolinsky like this. So as you can see, much smaller, and I'm going to do some edge highlights on this with a brighter colour than cold grey. We'll be using a Fortress grey kind of thing. I think it's called Ghost Grey is the technical one name for it. I use the old one, sorry, because it's just poor habit. Alright, so this time we are using pure, almost, so I'll mix a tiniest little bit of black with it. So really, really tiny, minuscule amount of black in that, just to take off some of that ultra harsh edge. And we're going to try and get rid of some of this paint just by putting it onto something. Definitely not a table, that would be awful advice. Okay, and what we're going to do is put it so that we're on a perpendicular or parallel, no, more perpendicular to this, so that we can get that, and it'll just naturally pick it up, like here and here, these kinds of places that you'd expect it to be brightest, so towards this panel. And it's very important that you do this stage, because this stage really adds an awful lot to the figure. So I'll put that there. Just be very careful that you don't go too far. And again, because I'm doing this with a standard brush, I have very little control over it. So I'm only using it on things that I know 100% that I can hit without missing. Because we do not want this to be... It's not the final highlight, so we're not done yet. But you don't want this going where you don't want it to go, because it's such a bright color. You'd be ruining like all this layering that you've done up to this point. And so I probably should be doing this with the other brush, but because we're going to be using it for some actual central highlights, just giving the brush a wash out, make sure I get these bristles nice and together. Sometimes bristles start to splay out a little bit, and at times like that it's worthwhile to have a tissue or something and just twirl the brush there so that you get your point back. Then do this, because as I was doing that I was just like, this is not working with me, it's working against me. You might notice that some of these panels at the back aren't so heavily highlighted, and that is actually because I want to focus on these rear engines. I want there to be a bit of darkness around it, so when I do actually paint the engines the blue, because I will be going for the traditional blue here, it stands out an awful lot. So this is just cold grey pure on, nice highlight spot. Again, it will dry much darker, and we can bring this down because it is a bit extremely bright. There. And we're going to try and do that just here. Now you want this on the actual panel because we are going to go for a much brighter grey overall. But we're sort of going to keep this nice and localized to this bottom quadrant. But that's the basic parts done. Now this is before we're going to do the small fine detail stuff. This is just the big overall covering everything with a big brush and hoping for the best kind of stuff that we're going for. After this we're going to be doing some very, very fine lines, starting with highlights, and then we'll work on doing the very, very small crevices, and we'll do that nice and easy. So what we'll do is we'll find a bright grey. Now I've got to go get that because that is over by the paint pots. Using Ghost Grey, like mentioned before, at this point you could call it done if you wanted to. I wouldn't. There's no way I'd call this done at this stage because the next few things are going to really take it up. So just remember what time this is in the video, because I've done multiple small videos. I can't actually tell you what stage of the video this is, just agitating the Ghost Grey in the background. Yeah, you really should just see how much this next few things changes stuff. Like, you do have to spend the time doing it, but it should really help. Now put it on the wet palette. Hopefully I'm not going to regret that when it gets too small and too watery. But we'll see how it goes. Pick up the figure and think, okay, so where's really going to be hit by the absolute brightest of bright colors? And I've got to say that in here is my first candidate. So making sure I've got a nice thin amount of paint. And again, coming at this perpendicular axis, we're going to try and pick that out really, really carefully. This is the kind of place that would be reflecting the light absolutely. And see, I've just gone a bit too far. Like, you know, the panel's a bit too obvious. What you do then, quickly wash out the brush, come back with a bit of water, put that there, and you can wipe most of it away. What I'm going to do as well is try and give a bit of a sense of the fact that these are individual panels. So each of these on their own constitutes a panel. So I'll try and highlight maybe the last 2/3 of a panel. So I'll put that on there and leave a bit of a gap between it, just to sort of imply, hey, this isn't just one long continuous piece of material. The next stage, when we're putting a dark color in the recesses, will really help this stage, because that's when you can actually see individual panels. In here, there's no light perpendicular that I can get. So I'm just going to leave that, and you know, light wouldn't be catching there as much anyway, but it's just too risky. I mean, I could do that if I wanted, and I'd be able to get away with it. That wouldn't be too much effort. But as a new person just trying to paint your first bunch of ships, I would not be risking that. Under here, we can hit that, because that'd be reflecting a bit of light, even though it's towards the bottom. Light would be catching there, so long as you don't get into the actual crevice. And we will be applying black there. Now the paint's coming off a bit difficult, so it's not very streamlined, so that's a sign that I've not watered it down enough. So I'm watering it down, putting that there, and thinking, okay, where else is going to be hit? Well, for sure we're going to be hitting this top panel here. So this one, it's not actually quite a right angle enough for me to really get away with doing this edge highlight thing. So I'm just going to manually put it there a little bit. Like that. So it does appear pretty bright, so we could bring that down a little bit. In fact, this part here hasn't actually been hit by much, light-wise. Put that there. That bit there. So I might come back here and I'll just use that cold grey, but use a pure cold grey, because it's actually in a dark zone. So at the moment we're looking at this and thinking, bumping the tripod. I'll move that just so that doesn't happen anymore. Yeah. So we're in a dark zone, so that going straight to this white might not necessarily be my best bet, whereas back here you would expect it to be a bit brighter. So we'll hit there. And we'll expect here to be a bit brighter. Now I will film this part, but I will speed it up as well. Hopefully I've got the capacity to do that with my video editor. If not, I might cut parts of this out. The reason we're opting to do the white highlight first, even though this part's probably going to be cut out of the video, is because it's easier to take it back down than it is to bring it back up. we're starting to sort of see the highlights coming together. It's working quite nicely. It's a bit extreme. Again, tabletop quality here is paramount to remember that that's what we're going for. It is a nice looking ship that's good from a distance. Some of these lines I'm doing a bit thick. If I was doing it normally, I'd just be washing my brush out, getting rid of those and quite bad. But what we're going to do here is allow these thick lines to exist, and we'll just reapply a bit of a darker grey. So just the pure cold grey, just to bring them back to that more neutral plane. So it really is quite a simple thing, because mistakes happen along the way. Like it does. It's like that one there. Like, you know, that's quite clearly a very bad line. But that is something that we can very easily manage without having to redo the whole figure. So we'll get back to that shortly. Just finish up a few little bits here. And you don't want to be too over the top with how much of this you're using, because the more of this you use, the less the impact actually is. So as you can see from the side, not so great, but from there, that's where you're sort of starting to get this. We won't go in and do any of the fine bits in there, because that's just, it's going to be too time consuming. And we'll just focus our attention elsewhere. So what we'll do now is the cold grey. So we'll come to our pure cold grey, grab this, mix a bit of water with it. And we're going to try and fix up just some of these uglier lines. So up here, for instance, where I missed quite badly. Just put this on. Like that. And because this is quite a bright colour, the pure cold grey, you might be thinking, why are we using this instead of like a mixture? And the answer is simple, because we're so close to a highlight point that it stands to reason that here might get hit by this colour as well. And we're not using it really to paint. This is just to fix up the uglier lines that I did. Most of them are not too bad, like not my best work, but they're not too bad, which is what we're after. Tabletop, again, get it out on the field. There's nothing stopping you coming back to this, you know, like at 6 months down the line. Like you finish your fleet, you do all this, you can come back in and you can do all the little panels and things that you'd like. So there, that's fine. Leaving a bit of that white shining through. That's a bit too thick there, but we'll cover that up with the black just into the crevice to really highlight how bright it is. At that particular juncture, we'll put that there. We'll make sure, because this is the pure, not even a hint of any other black or anything like that. We'll put some of this just there to act as a bit of a pseudo highlight. Put it on just nice. Just to bring a bit more attention to this spot. It might otherwise get a bit missed. So that's a bit too thick, because this is mine. Again, remember I said that I was putting this not on the wet palette, which means this paint's sort of solidified slightly, so I've had to mix in a bit more water. There we are. Just like that. And we'll sort of hit here. Just these various areas with just mild highlights, just more interest, because the more pieces there are that sort of take the attention, the less anyone focuses on any one area. So while there might be mistakes here and there from the table, this will just be a very interesting piece. Like that. Bit more interest there. Here, here, maybe some there, bit of one there. Apply a little bit to the top. And this is what I mean by working it up and then back down. So it's not all like you just start dark, you work brighter. It's you start dark, you work brighter, you work back down, you work back up, and you just keep going till you get something that you're happy with. I mean, you can stop at any point. Like there's nothing saying you have to follow every part of this little guide. And I am trying to do this with the bare bones tool, so stuff that everyone should pretty much have access to. So that there's not like this big exhaustive list of things you have to pick up before you can even paint your fleet. We've done this with 2 brushes and 3 paints, I think. Oh, and a primer. And a primer. Got that there. Let's see, how's that looking? Some thick lines here and there, but yeah, that should be good that side. Top's looking okay. Bit of an ugly bit here. Like that line up the top there is a bit too thick. So I'll just bring that back a bit. Again, the paint's starting to dry, so a bit more water. That's why I advocate the wet palette so much. There we are. And here, like especially this one, because this one got really ugly lines. Just work that back a bit. On top here, we're going to try and not hit this white highlight because I was happy with the thinness of that line, but I'm a bit unhappy with how dark up here is. Just I feel like it should be brighter. This middle section, we can leave that. I don't want to draw too much attention to it. It's not the best part of the model, so you know I don't really want everyone to look there. And that's what you can use bright parts for, is drawing the attention. Bring that line in a bit. What about these side panels? Yeah, that's alright. I'll work this part back a bit. There we are. I'm thinking that should be about done. What do you guys reckon? Yep, we'll call that done now. And we will work on the black panels. This is where you're going to see it all start coming together really, really quickly. This is the exciting part. And again, this is just the black and grey coats. We're going to do like little textures and lights and things like that. And that'll be all fine. But here we are, on to the black part. Next part, what we're going to want to do is really water down some of this black. So I'll take a bit of a scoop of that out and we'll put it back onto the palette, which I brought back into focus. I'm just going to put it right there. So even if we pan a little bit and look at this. Okay, so straight out of the pot, that is not our friend right now. What we want is really watered down because we're using this as like a wash. Now a wash is something that's designed to go into sort of the recesses, and we're going to try and use the natural desire of water to go a bit lower on our own team. So putting that there, that's pretty damn runny. Like there's no way you could get a decent streak of that onto a flat surface and not have it going into the crevices, which is exactly what we're after here. So I'm going to push that back a little bit so my hands have got some room so I'm not constantly kicking this damn tripod. Normally I would not use a pure black for this because using pure black on anything is, because you can't go any darker, like it's a bit limiting in what you can do from then on in, but I am going to in this case. You do want a fine brush for this. You really want to water this down. I'm going to add a little bit more water because you really want it nice and thin. And we're going to come in and very careful. Now you do not have to be quite as precise as I'm going to try and be here, but this is a very important step because it adds depth to each of the panels. I'm going to just give that line a once over. Now I could do the next one like this, but I want to do every line that goes this way like this because this is the position that is most stable for me. So I can work that there, work this one here, and I don't want to be giving in and forcing myself to do like these ones like that because that's like, you can't see my arm, but it's a very awkward angle. So it's much better to just hit everything like this. And it's very important that you don't have too much paint on the brush, but you have enough that it comes out in one smooth stroke. So like that there. Now as you do this, if you spill a bit of paint or there's a bit too much, just get your finger and just go over it like that. Should protect you from most of it. That there. Again, does not have to be perfect. But because this is black, and we haven't actually used the pure black up till now, the panels will even stand out on these ones back here. Put that there. Follow that little bend around. You can just shade there a little bit. Make it so all of this is a bit darker, so we can see just that dichotomy between the top panels and that darker part there. and it really does make quite a world of difference, and it's really a quick thing. So what we'll do is this, and you might not see it straight away, but when I flick over and we look at the other side that we haven't worked on yet, the difference is just phenomenal. At least in my eyes. That is just my opinion. Okay, and we're going to try and work this there, because that top part's just a bit splotchy, so why not just get rid of it? Okay. Only come at this with angles that you're confident in. So if you're not confident in it, just abandon it. Like don't come at it like that. Just wait till you get into a position that you're confident that you can get that angle with, because this part, if it's rushed, you can really undo all those highlights. Like even the part that I sort of scratched off just wiping it away with my finger, it did leave a bit of black residue, which is less than ideal because it sort of damages it. Now I know I said don't come at it like this, but I have repositioned it so that this is pretty comfortable for me. And also just because I'm trying to get this on film, unfortunately I've sort of got to do this in a way that's not perfect. Thankfully the bases actually really help out on this. So having the elements on stands like this means that I can manipulate it and turn it around as I need. So I'll put that there, cover that, get more. And this is the most time consuming part. It's going to be chasing down all these little lines. Oh, see I was a bit shaky there? That's okay. Tabletop, remember that. This is how I actually do my lines. So I've managed, because this part of the ship's easy to access, this is how I do the lines on my personal ships. This is one of my personal ships, but as in the way that I like to do them, because it gives me a lot more control than the previous ways I've done. So here. So there are two people that can't recognize. Never mind. I was going to go for a joke, but lost the track of it there. And figured, what the heck? Especially because the problem is now, this video has been going so long, I obviously can't undo this, which means that I'm just stuck with a dodgy joke partway through that I didn't complete. Alright, and I've missed spots there, so I spread the black a bit too much, so just wipe it with my finger. I left it for too long, which means now I've got to put that back like that, and we'll just keep going. Make sure we hit these back panels here. So again, we're using water to cheat, because the water wants to pull down into these deeper parts, which means that it's much easier for me to do it. If we were using straight paint, the paint would go anywhere that you touch, because we've watered it down so much. Not too much, mind you. Not to the point where it's just slopping everywhere. It just gives me that little bit extra control. I'm actually going to need a fresh scoop in a sec. It definitely needs more water on it. Hitting under these, because that's the kind of place that would just naturally be shadowed. We'll hit in here, because here you'd expect there to be a bit more of a shadow. You see from a distance, so have that nice and close, and it's like, it's not the prettiest, but put it back there, and suddenly we're sort of talking. That definitely, on a table, would look pretty damn good. We've got enough contrast that stands out, it shines, it sheens, and compare that to, that, which is definitely nowhere near as pretty. So we'll flick that back, we'll finish the job. I'll go through can do this with you if you want, or I can fast forward it. In fact, I'll fast forward it. So I'll finish this side and then I'll just do the other side and we'll start on the next little bit. I do hope this is of help for you because, you know, it's a bit strange for me to be doing it this style. It's very unusual for me. Again, like, because I had to do my fleet up 100% before I did my application to be a Vanguard, I essentially painted for just weeks solid. And they're not the best out there. There are much better fleets than mine, but I'm just so slow. Okay, so we've hit there, and in there we can just do an actual wash. Not much point in fiddling around. There is actually a small thin line just there. So I'll hit that one. Let's take that. Got that. We've reasonably got the back. Oh, so I'm trying to describe something to you, and then of course I've got it off screen. Just sort of give that a wash. And we'll also get the parts in here that we haven't highlighted necessarily. But we've got these, which we can hit now. I've lost too much detail, so a bit of a thumb wipe, and it's picked up just that superficial layer, leaving the deeper stuff behind, which is exactly what we're going for. Okay. Pretty happy. I did miss there though. I've hit this back, so what I'll do now is I'll just grab some of my grey. Thankfully still a little bit wet. Put that on there. Hopefully that's not going to be too bad when it dries. Especially because I'm trying to apply it watery here so that I sort of lose that black, but I don't influence the colour too much because I was relatively okay with how it was looking just before. And there we have it. Now, once more, we've got the pre-one and the panel side. And we can re-highlight that. So any parts that we're not too happy with. And just from a distance, so I'll move this back a little bit. And we'll have a look again and you'll see. All right. But the true hero is when it's like that. It would be remiss of me to do a painting video for a tabletop quality and to not mention doing a wash. Now, painting models is a time-consuming thing. You're just in one of those hobbies that unfortunately, or fortunately, because I happen to actually very much enjoy it, but if you are after a speedier result than doing all these lines, you can do a wash all over. We used a wash-like consistency, but then manually applied it. So I have done the other side, just lightly, very quickly. Doing this. I still have to do these back panels and things, and I will get to that in just a sec, but I figured while I was thinking of it, I might as well show you a wash. Now you can get pre-made inks, or you can make your own. To make an ink, you essentially just water down a paint to a great extent, sort of like you've done to actually get to this stage. So I'll put a bit more water, but then beyond. So this is an ink here, very thin, very watery, like you can see that it pulls itself back together, and that is exactly what we're after here. You could apply this all over, but the problem with washes is that it's going to leave residue, and you've worked pretty hard at making some decent blends. So like this is by no means the best blend thing, but it does look quite effective. And you would ruin a lot of that by putting a wash over the top of it. But in these crevices here, where we left it quite dark, is the perfect place to put a wash. It doesn't really matter what happens, the black is just going to run into these deeper, darker parts, and it's going to basically give us just that extra bit of texture and detail and really show the depth of these sections. So instead of just being mono grey, we can get a bit of black, and it just looks like shadows really. And it's going to protect us because any bits of this that we've missed that are just a bit too unnaturally light, we can cover with this wash. I'm going to add a bit more, and we'll just cover that like so. Putting that there, bit more, okay, we should be good to go. Again, there. Now this is a bit too dark, so I'll probably mix a bit more water. Heck, we'll use this part on the table. Don't let anyone see that I'm doing that though. And we'll put that like that there, just through there. Just let that get it. but you don't want to overdo it. It is important to know that there are limits to what this can do. I'm applying it here because we're going to darken this area, which means that it's going to have more contrast between here and here. At this back section where I've done next to no highlighting is a perfect candidate for something that could get hit by a wash. I deliberately left this quite dark because we're going to be adding the thrusters in a while. And so here can be hit, and that's just a bit of extra texture. It's free, you know, it doesn't cost us anything. Let's do that, because we are really just after making interesting surfaces. There. Okay. Now, you've noticed I've actually left that there, but that's because we're going to be putting white in there as a base coat, and then working our way back down. So that is a wash, and we'll just quickly hit in there as well. All these deep spots. And if your wash gets a bit too far, again, a finger is a friend. So you can do a bit of that, just save it. Undersides are an excellent place to do a bit of a wash because, you know, you're not going to see this very often. It's not like these figures are going to be picked up off that. Most of the time they're going to be viewed laterally or from the top. You know, that's where you're spending most of your time. A wash can also be used to sort of add a bit of a glaze. Glazes are different to wash, and I'll be doing a very specific video because glazes are phenomenal. But you can just put it in there, a very light wash, and it's applied. Like, this isn't just slopping it all over. Some people will just put it all over, and in my opinion, that's abusing a wash. Right? That's asking too much from it that the wash just can't do. But here we're framing something manually, so we're not making the wash do the work, but we're using the wash as a tool, and that's sort of like an airbrush. A lot of people misuse the airbrush because they're like, hey, look how much faster I can get it done, but they forget that, you know, it's a tool. Although you can get it done faster, doesn't mean you should. Like, I mean, you could spray this grey and it would be done faster than an airbrush could do it even. Alright, and we'll hit back here because these panels are sort of in the shadow, so we can create a bit more contrast by making it so that these sort of cut off. A real ship probably wouldn't have as much contrast as we've got here, but we are trying to emulate something small and tiny, and so from a distance, oh, pretty, pretty, pretty. There we are. I'm going to add these last lines now and get back to you. We should have pretty much done the grey. Yeah, you know. So I'll do a few touch-ups here and there, and we're done for this part. And then we're going to do more exciting parts, which is using actual colours, because I'm probably sick of this monochrome stuff that I'm doing. Would you believe it? The ordeal of grey is now done. So what we're going to start to do is a little thing called colour. It's one of those fun things that you can learn all about. So we're going to be adding lots of bright, shiny things, and to do that, we're going to want to start with a bone white. If you apply a paint directly over a dark colour, often the previous colour seeps through. That's fine if it's going to be something like over a lighter colour, but because we're going to be doing bright glowing lights and things like that, we really do not want this to be showing through. So we're going to come, so I like to do port and starboard lights, and that's what these things are for here. So port and starboard, they've got different colours, so the red and green ones, you'll see them on ships and planes and things like that. But we're going to do a base coat of a bone white. Don't be too flustered if you miss a little bit doing this. It's not end of the world. We can come back and we can reapply it. Or you could apply it doing the special technique I'm going to try for the first time, because I haven't actually tried it, but I'm pretty confident it's going to work, which is this retarder medium that will mix with some of the bone white. And so you want a good solid coverage, but you don't want to put it on too thick. So this isn't really watered down because you don't want it to be too watery, and this wet palette is going to ruin this this colour shortly. So yeah, let's make that a light. We need something to break up the boringness of this. What else? What else can we make light? So definitely some lights in there. So let's get some of them. That can be a light. You can be a light. That. And that, again, no real rush or worry if we miss a little bit. fact, I'm just going to stroke these ones on here, and we'll use a wash over the top of it to get that colour back. So again, we'll use the stroke up here, and we'll dab on the dots, because the dots are pretty easy to hit because they're out on their own. Yeah, we can dot these ones too, because I remember you were a light and you guys are lights. What about these under things? Yeah, let's make them lights. I mean, the more lights there are, like, because this is a really visually interesting part. And the UNSC ships, they're not as blessed like the Covenant ones are with this interesting colour patterns. Most people are painting their UNSC ships a dark grey, and it does get a bit boring. Not in a bad way, because the UNSC ships are like more realistic in that regard, but we'll try and hit these up. See, already it's getting a bit too watery. Alright, then we can make this back part a light. And you can be one. In a sec we'll even start making our own, which will be windows and things like that. So with this, I'm stroking like above the figure, and sometimes I'm not even hitting anything. And then I just lower it ever so slightly, just so I'm barely hitting the stuff, so that the lights sort of get picked up naturally, because you don't want to force it too much. You can do that. We won't overdo the lights. So that's pretty interesting like that. Probably want one towards the front somewhere, but I'll just add windows to that in a sec. And the top, we're going to be doing that silver, so we can leave that. Where else have we got? Well, I haven't done these tail lights. Again, see, like I'm air stroking a little bit. There we are, then lower a little bit. And this is similar to what's called the dry brush, but it's actually an overbrush when you've got more paint on it, because I'm leaving quite a fair bit of paint when I do actually hit. And these don't need to be perfect, because they are just undercoats, and we will reapply darkness around them down the line. So even that, just a bit of white, starts making it more interesting. But I'm going to grab a retarder medium, and we're going to work on painting some lights in. I have Vallejo's retarder medium, one of the few things you don't really need to shake up. What this does is it retards paint drying. So for those of you who only know that from the unfortunate derogatory term, it inhibits or otherwise slows down the ability of paint to dry. So we're going to be using the properties of this mixed with our white, or sorry, bone white, or bone. So I'll put that there. Scoop a fair bit. You'll notice how I'm not coming above halfway. I don't want to damage the base of my brush. Rinse out our brush. Pow. See, this is more exciting, much more exciting, because we're actually painting colours. And we're going to put a little bit of retarder out, like that. It's clear liquid. So we'll mix some retarder, put it there, scoop some of this, and we have a very slow to dry paint. I'm going to dump my brush just tiniest little bit in water, put that there, scoop up some more, and we should be good to go. What we're going to do now is make sure we've got a nice tip, and just try somewhere. First I'll try and show you what a retarder does. So I'll grab a figure I'm not working on right now. Here, a base from one of the Halo Grand Command stuff, and you put the retarder down. So that's a bit too focused on the edges, so I'll add a bit more paint to retarder ratio. and we'll put our little windows. So let's do them just like we're going to. So I'll focus that in. My apologies for hitting this so many times as well. So let's do 3 little slashes as a window, and one more. That's not so bad. So I'm pretty happy with that, even on the figure. But they are a little long. So what we're going to do is rinse that. Because most of these windows, you want them to be like, that's way too long and thin. Because of the retarder in it, we should be able to wipe some of this away. And just make them that little bit thinner. And you see, it's still really easy to do that. And this stuff stays wet for ages. Which does mean you actually have to, before we do the next coat on them, just hit it again. Have to. So I've smudged the paint, and now I'm just going to come in and just pull it away a little bit. Very carefully. And you sort of just wipe it away, just gradually. And it's a lot easier to do that than try and get the paint job right the first time. So it should be pretty good all up. I think it's going to work pretty well in giving us pretty consistent window sizes, because we can just bring it in from the outside. It's much easier to sort of have, instead of painting a perfect square, like we could paint like a blob and then use the brush to sort of shape it. And so it's much easier to get nice, big, solid strokes out here and have them come out all neat than it is to get them perfect first go. So we'll put some windows on. Okay. You do need a bit of water with this. If you don't have enough water, the paint just does not come off, come out. So put a bit more retarder in. And you do sort of need to blob it on a little bit, but you want thin strokes. And that means a fine tip. Okay, so I've got some there. Let's try and make it a bit heavier on the tip, so I get more of a window shape. So these are coming out pretty alright just like that. You know, they're going to look like nice solid windows from a distance. The colour's pretty good. I probably don't need to use a different colour on top of it. A lot of people prefer like a yellow. I prefer this bone white kind of colour because it's an off white. It's perceivably whitish. Come on, focus. Come on, focus, my friend. There we are. So it's a perceivably white colour, but we'll try and do it so that I get this one wrong. So here I put it on, and that's pretty splotchy. Like, it's not as nice and thin as my other one. So, oh no, what am I going to do? Well, I got a bit too much paint on the brush, so put one there, another one there. See, that one's not as nice. Like that. Okay, so I'm not really happy with any of those three. So I rinse my brush off, make sure there's a bit of water on it, and I come in from the outside, knowing that this is still quite a wet paint. See, already I'm starting to get a bit of definition back on that edge. And now I'm going to come a bit lower, so maybe I'll bring it up a bit. Just nice and easy. Like sort of like erasing on a blackboard, something like that. Then I'll bring it down a little bit. And just tidy up this edge here too now. And see, that's much nicer. I probably could have used a bit more paint on it, because that's a bit too easy to see through. But that's the whole idea. So you rinse your brush out. It is important to rinse the brush out quite regularly, so you're not smudging too much of the paint around. And I'll bring this one in, and just make it a little more square, as it were. Because I think too often, it's easy to do rectangles because it's just one long down, but that's a much nicer shape. I mean, it looks a bit messy up here, but I think that's mostly because it's wet. Yeah, so we'll keep going with this. But that is my tip to you for trying to get neater windows, is a retarder. Now, don't overdo them, so lots of thin ones, little tiny things. So And even if you apply it like a few times, because you want the window to shine through reasonably thickly, like it's not much good if you're going to have this and it's too transparent to see. So even if you dab a few times in the same spot till the color starts to show up a bit more. So even that, a bit too dark, so maybe I'll mix a bit more paint in with the retarder, because the retarder will thin out your paint, obviously, because it's competing for space on the brush. We'll do our little dashes and dots. I'm pretty happy with these as they are, so I don't need to tidy them up too much. But I've got that retarder there for me if I didn't like the particular way this paint worked out. It's important too to make it look very apparent that I am the one deciding where these go. I'm not just splotching it on willy-nilly, and part of that is clusters of them together, and also just showing that, yeah, these are something that I put there by the same size, because they're roughly the same size, which means that from a distance they'll look intentional. There we are, focusing again. See, that's looking pretty nice, isn't that? Compare that to what we started with. All these little details really start adding up fast. So I've washed my brush off again. I'm just going to fix up this one because at the bottom, just not so happy with him. But because I got the retarder, I can. I'm pretty happy with the width, just the length is a bit too long. So I'll just rub him out. And would you look at that? Oh, actually you can't because it's too blurry. There we are. So that bottom one's pretty happy with. Wash my brush out, come back again, and I'll fix up these two, which I'm not so happy with either. That's a bit too wet. So I'm just going to rub it out. Because there's two, got to be a lot more careful. There we are. There we go. I think that looks a bit better. I mean, actually looks a bit like there's probably a bit too much paint in there at the moment because that one didn't rub off as well as it should have. But I'll just press a bit harder, and there we are. That's starting to work again. So we'll keep going. We'll just add a few more windows, a bit more paint, a bit more retarder, so I can get a fair bit on the brush. A bit more water to it because you want it to really run off the brush. And the retarder does glug it up a bit, and then it's just not as smooth flowing. So we'll hit like every panel a little bit, not literally every panel, but so as you can see with these ones, they've sort of gone away a little bit, and that's probably because I used my brush with a bit too much water on it, and I left the water there. So because I left the water there, it smudged a little further than it should have. Don't know why I put a window up there. I personally wouldn't want to actually be on the front of a Mac as a window, like no matter how good the view might be. So that one was actually quite sloppy, so I'm just going to get rid of that one entirely. Brush and then rub it out. Just like that. And we'll get back into the main business. Got to put some up here. I'm sure that's plenty of time for you to see how I'm applying the windows. So I have rushed through it, but I have finished the windows, so I'll try and get that bit of a focus and show both sides are done. Not the best, but again, focusing on quick, because that's the goal behind this. Even though to you it probably won't seem that quick. To me, this is freaking astronomical that I've got this far so fast. The next thing we're going to try and do is some actual colors. So for instance, we've got the red and light, so I'll get that set up and I'll go grab my paints and we'll start working on that. Actually, we can do the steel now. We'll do that real quick. So I've got Vallejo chainmail silver, so mixing that up. And we'll apply that. This is going to be a real simple thing. We're going to cheat and we'll use Nuln oil, which is an actual pre-existing wash, so not one that we're making ourselves. Put a bit of paint down. We're not really going to water this down all that much. It's important to always water it down a bit, but again, just so it flows smoothly off the brush. And now we're going to pick up our model and just apply this here. So the important thing is that it's not too watery, but it's not too thick. So it's got to come out nice and smoothly. And it's okay to leave a bit of dark spots, like even though the metal actually does continue down there, as long as we've got that defined edge between the two, because I'd rather sacrifice the realism, because the metal would go there, for the more defined edge, which just means that the paint job will look neater and everything looks more intentional from a distance. Because realistically we should go down that whole way, but again, doesn't matter too much. And you know what, we'll make these metal too, just to break things up. Because you don't want too much of the same stuff just again and again. And there is a lot of grey on these, even though silver is really just the shiny version of grey. We won't bother painting under it. No, actually we will. Now that I've mentioned, it's going to bother me if I don't. I'll put that there. Not that you guys can see a lot of that under there. Tilt it so you can. Just annoy me now if I don't. And you know what, we can make this silver here. So let's make all that silver, metally. Doesn't matter if we don't get a perfect cover because we're going to hit it with a heavy wash. So we've been pretty sparing with things like that up till now, but no, this we're going to hit heavy. I know we even did the black lines on this earlier, but stuff it. More textures, more interesting stuff. So we'll also make sure, this is the important part here, is these back engines. You really want to hit all these thruster panels, I guess. They're not really panels, they're almost like directional things to, well, they can't be letting oxygen in, I guess. I suppose directionality. The oxygen obviously is going to come from the ship itself, or there we are. And so even though it's like a very bright silver, we're going to fix that with our washes. Inside of here, we'll hit the outer rim, but we won't hit deep inside there because that's going to be a bright blue. But a bit of that blue might shine through, allow some of the silver to shine through, so you can still see the metallic effect. And don't forget the side thrusters. I know the big ones sort of grab your attention, but it is very worthwhile noting that there's actually 6 on the back there. So I'll make sure I get those too. Now chainmail silver is actually not the brightest silver offered by Vallejo, but because we've gone for such a dark, otherwise ship, it's sort of showing up incredibly brightly, which is good, especially because we're going to hit it with such a heavy wash. Where else can we get? There's no real reason, like some of this stuff is, to me, pretty clearly going to be like a metallic in color, but a lot of it is really discretionary, like whether or not I choose to make it silver. I'll make this silver just for interest. Probably overhit there, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to fix it up later. What else can we hit? Some of these little things here. And we'll leave that. We'll leave that. Yeah, we'll make this little piston-y thing at the back. Metal. That little piston-y thing there. You can be metal too. Yeah, and we'll make you metal. Whatever you are. And where else? Well, we'll make sure we get this one. And that should do. We'll give that a little bit to dry, and while we do that, I'll grab my colored paints so we can add some lights. I'll be doing blue lights on all these things here, aside from the panels that are designated to be markers for port and starboard. Alright, so I already have these paints, so I'm going to use them, but there's no reason that you need to buy extra colors just for the sake of doing a few small lights here and there. I'll be using a magic blue and livery green, as well as a heavy red. Red, we can't really go for a bright, vibrant one without starting with a darker one, because red's just one of those pain colors that really requires stuff. So we'll start on the right side and we'll do the greens. Pretty simple. We'll just be hitting them all with green. Funny though. Put the green down. I've gone for this because it's a really bright green, like the kind of neon like you would expect this to be. Especially if these ships were trying to stand out, like port and starboard. I mean, there's no real reason why they'd need to do that. I don't think there's any ships in the lore that necessarily have it like this, but I just think it's a cool thing to do. And there we are. Now that's turning up quite bright, but that's because of this underlay we've got. And don't mind that it's like running a bit. I mean, because I'm putting it on the wet palette, it's going to do that, because green's another one of those colours. Particularly this shade of green that comes out very, very, very wet. So I'll put those down there. So there. Now we can make these top ones blue. You know, so we're not doing too much green. And that way it's all there. That's pretty much all the green we're going to do. We can go and make it a bit brighter. Add a white to it if we really wanted to, but probably won't. So we'll do that. Now we'll add the red. The trick is just to let a smidge out of these dropper bottles. And I failed. See, we're using the red for the same amount as we use the green, but look at the size of that. The green one, that's mostly an air bubble, so if I pop that, okay, of course it's not popping on there, but you can see the bubble. But the red, that's solid paint, which means that I've grabbed way too much, so a bit frustrated. Then again, we do need to do multiple layers with the red. We can't just have it on once and then have like, oh yeah, I'm happy with that, because the red is going to always look just very, it's just too dark when you put it on, because I want that same sort of neon effect. So I'm actually going to have to mix up that with an orange of sorts. I've got one on hand that I use because it works really nicely with red. But that's more for a cloaky matte colour. Okay. There we are. That's the red. Now, this is the orange that I mixed with my red. It's scrofulous brown, which I think is related to something to do with tuberculosis or something. I don't know. Some sort of disease. Okay, so I'm agitating that. Put out a tiny bit, hopefully less than I did. There we are. That's a better amount. And I'll mix that. So there's actually going to be a lot of orange in this mixture because I really do want this to stand out and be nice and bright and really just grab your attention. I don't want it to be like this red, which is quite somber. Like, so that's all good like that. And because it is colour on an otherwise grey thing, but see that green just really pops? That's what we're trying to avoid, is having a boring red. I'll be giving this area a wash too, so don't worry about the fact that it's run into the recesses and stuff like that. Yeah, whatever, we'll call that done. Maybe a bit of pure yellowy colour. It really does need help to compete with that green. I love that green. Livery green. Hope you wish me luck with this damn video editor. Yeah, that'll do. Okay. Because again, tabletop quality. We're not doing this. This isn't my Vanguard application. I'm not going to spend forever and ever and ever on this ship. I want to show you that, you know, you can paint this. Alright, so we've got that. Now, while we're waiting for that to dry, actually we'll put our blues on. We'll do that. Then we'll hit the ink stuff. So mixing my magic blue off the background and put down, I put down more of that than I did the red. That's disappointing. Look at that waste. Look at that. That is one of the disadvantages to the dropper bottles. I will say that. Okay, so I've wiped some of that off. I shouldn't be wiping it on my hand. It's just because I haven't got something in hand. Oh, that was an unintentional pun, I promise. So I'll put that there. Should show through nice. Now up here, where we've got that the strokes, we're not going to really outline the individual things. We'll let a wash do that down the line. We'll just put that like that. Just as a bit of colour. We'll make sure we hit these bottom little things. You got to be real careful not to get this too deep. Also want to try and get decent coverage over those, or otherwise you'll just have bits of white spotching out. These things at the back, we'll make them. Actually, yeah, we will use this blue for the thrusters, so that's okay. I forgive myself for putting way too much down. Okay. Yes, that's pretty good. Maybe hit that one, because they're obviously not all windows. And we'll switch sides over. Let's hit these ones down the bottom. There we are. Okay, and we've got to hit those, that deep one, the line. Like that. As you can see, it's like really starting to come together. It's not as boring as it was at the start. All these little extra bits take it from an okay ship to like, it's really getting up there. Alright, we'll wait for that to dry, and then we'll hit the ink. Okay, so we'll ink this back part now, because soon we're going to be putting white in there, and we don't want our black ink. Can you hear that? Ooh, what have I done there? That's not good. Okay, so I will try and get some of our grey. Nope, it's all dry. Alright. Yeah. Got a bit of this. Hopefully I can fix that. Thankfully it's not too bad because it's just back here. And I'll be hitting this area with another wash and I'll darken that stuff up. There's a bit of a black. There. Now, never use paint directly from the pot. So, but I'm pretty much going to use paint directly from the pot. Just in darkening that. Just goes to show you watch what you're doing. Okay, now the ink. Paint don't use straight from the pot, but non-oil, feel free to. In fact, I actually work with it open. Normally I am such a stickler for making sure I do not leave these open. One thing you do want to be careful of is do not knock those over. I've seen many a manly tear shed by people that have knocked those over, because unlike paint, those things run so fast. Like, there is no saving it once it's down. So this I will apply nice and thickly. Focusing on the outside here, because the outside is the part that isn't really going to be hit by the blue that we're painting. And I'm going to take it in a bit so I get those parts that I ran my orange paint over. I guess they're rusting now. Okay, that should do. Make sure I get in there again. Okay, wrinkle it out, and we're still keeping going with the black because we're going to apply some of that very carefully in here. Now we want to make sure we don't darken the actual buttons because we worked hard on them. Well, we worked on them, I'll say that. So I don't want to cover up that orange too much. But this is going to fix up some of the extra bits. And I'll just cover it nice and thickly here. Let these washes sort of work on the definition. Because it's so deep, it doesn't really matter that I'm not hitting that perfectly. If I was painting this up for a competition or a display piece, you're damn right I'd be doing that a lot nicer, but this is to show tabletop. So I'll do that. Yeah, that's pretty good. That covers most of the definition. I did miss that one spot for the blue on the other side, on this side. There. Okay. Now we will seal our paint. Make sure we don't leave that open too much. And we'll do the thrusters in a bit when we've given them a sec to dry. We're on the last leg now. In the background, I've gone and just quickly put some white on the inside only of these back thrusters, and I've also put the white daubs just on the four little ones as well. So that's the only thing that I've done since you've been gone, dear viewer. And so what we're going to do now is get a bit of white, okay, a lot of white, and mix it with a tiny bit of blue. So we get a really, really, really like disgustingly bright blue. And we're going to use this as a wash, but not super duper watered down. What we're going to use is a very, very thin amount, and just sort of paint that on there like that, like really thin, so it's still letting the white shine through because we want it to be so ultra bright. Now it's okay to cover up the white at this stage because we're going to reapply the white in the center when we're done, or near to the center because it's actually a bit darker in the center. Now we're not going to be doing too much of this OSL style stuff, we're just going to be putting this blue all over. Now this is like pretty much all white with just the tiniest bit of blue just for the colour. So I'm not just reapplying, a second coat of white. But if you're trying to do this mix at home, because this was magic blue, now you can see it's more an ice blue. Okay. I've got that. So that's a good start, nice bright colour, like really, oh, that looks like a thruster. But we haven't done any of the like dimensionality of it yet, so we'll give that a little bit to dry, and then we'll get back to it again. And here we have a little bit of a wash, so we're going to try and focus this on the outside. Again, not perfect, but it does a good job of sort of simulating how this should look. Probably better if I put it in, the actual focus of the lens. That's very watered down. and I'm applying that to the outside. So focusing the wash a little bit thicker in these crevices. So as you can see, like the thrusters have those ones there, so I can sort of slash up, and that'll give that texture that I'm after, hopefully without making it too thick at the base. Now I'll give that a little bit to dry. It's nowhere near as nice as getting it from the airbrush, but I'll give that a bit to dry, then I'll use a white dot in the very center of that, but I won't bother videoing that. I'll compile this and show you. So that is one fully hand-painted UNSC ship with a few tricks done. So the one thing I didn't do was dry brushing, but I'm not a huge fan of that, not a very big advocate. But I hope this has been of use to you, and that you all enjoy some nice UNSC ships. Only out.